Hello everyone, thanks for joining me today. My name's Markos Keir. I'm one of the managing consultants at Altus, and today I'm going to be doing a webinar on using Custom Visio Visuals in Power BI. As I go through today, I'm going to start off showing you a few samples and examples and go over some use cases of where you might use this, where we might use Visio visuals in a Power BI report. I'll cover the prerequisites because you do need certain licensing to be able to use this. I'll then do a how-to demonstration where I'll cover how you would build one of these reports, and then there'll be time for questions and answers at the end. So without further ado, let me get onto the heart of this and show you some samples. Okay, so the first example that I've got here, and when you're using Visio and Power BI, it's very specific use cases. So it's not, you're not using Visio to create tables or to create, a bar chart. They're obviously available from Power BI straight out of the box. But it's very specific visuals where you need to show your own custom shapes and data on a report. So one of the examples that I'm using here is, I've cheekily called it Game of Cubicles, where everyone's fighting for the corner office. What this is imagine you've got a hot desking system. You've got people and they go in and they book which desk that they're going to use for the day, and you want a way to visually show where people are in the office on the, if you're looking to find somebody, and secondly, if you're trying to make a booking, you want to know what desks are available, and you can see that on the map here. So the idea here is that you would create a Visio floor plan, and you would then connect that up to Power BI. And so as you can see here, the red ones are the ones that are booked, and there's somebody using those, and the green ones are available. And you can see it's showing, it's a little bit small here, so I'll just zoom in a bit. And so you can see, it shows you the name of the person who's made the booking, and the color red to show the status, so the table's reserved. And the visuals are interactive as well. So if I click on something here, for example, it will zoom in on the Power BI, on the Visio visual to show exactly where they've booked it. And vice versa, if I unclick that, and for example, I click on this visual, it will filter the data over here. So it's an interactive visual, just like you would, just like any other Power BI visual. So this is one example of how you might use it. I've got some date filters here as well, so you can see where people are booking on different days. You can see on this date that there's a lot more bookings than the previous date, and again it's just highlighting in red. And depending on how you set this up, I've got it set up so that it highlights the whole desk and the whole area. You can make it so that it just highlights a label. It really comes down to how you set up the data linking. The second example, and this is another scenario that somebody asked me to do. So this one, again, I've just given it a silly name, Game of Servers. A previous client that I was working at, they had a physical server room, and they had a number of racks in that server room, and they wanted to be able to keep track of exactly which shelf, what was on each shelf of the server racks. And so they asked me to do a report for that. And again, straight out of Power BI, there's nothing that really does it, very neatly. I mean, you could probably do it. You could theoretically do it with just a regular table, but they wanted something a little bit more visual. And so the solution here was to come up with a Visio diagram, which for some reason is not loading right now. Is to load up a Visio diagram, and then we use that Visio diagram to dynamically show which slots were taken and which ones were not. Let me just quickly check why that's. Okay, my computer's having a little bit of a moment right now, so we'll just give it a minute and it should load up. Of course, this didn't happen when I was practicing. It's only now that I'm doing this demo. I can see something happening. There we go. So some of these Visio visuals do take up a little while to load the first time, and Power BI will actually give you a warning if you've got a lot of shapes. As you're seeing on my screen right now, diagram has a large number of shapes and may take time to load for users. Generally, I find it's not as bad as what you saw just here, but yes, it can take a little while. And so again, similar sort of thing as we saw before. I can choose a different date, and it shows us what, which shelves in the rack are being used. It's giving us some names there. I can click on a value here and it zooms in on the report. It's all very interactive. The third example I'm going to show you now, and this one was a little bit more tricky than the others, and it's this one that I'm going to focus on. I was doing some work for a government department, and what they wanted was to be able to show a map, and on that map they wanted to highlight the rivers within New South Wales, the status of those rivers, and some the status of certain elements of those rivers as well. Now, there are mapping tools that come straight out of the box with Power BI. There's the GIS maps, there's shape maps, there's a whole lot of them. The closest thing I could find to this was the GIS maps. And the GIS maps will allow you to highlight the rivers, which is fantastic. But what it didn't allow me to do was to color code them to show the different status, or to include the icons like I've done here. And so the way I worked around that was to create a custom visual in Power BI. And so now I can, if I click on this one, the Namoy River filters the data. I can also, I get all that interactivity again. If I unselect that. I've just created some icons here due to the privacy and this, the non-disclosure statements that I've had to sign. I haven't been able to use the real icons, of course, or the real data, but this does give it, an indication of what I did build there. Just untick that. So another example is, if I click on one of these icons, again, it's interactive and it should filter the data over here. There we go. And it's showing me the status. I've just called that Mirage. It was just an icon that I've chosen from Visio. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a quick demo of how I did that using a different map. And I'll just show you from scratch exactly the process that I used to build that. So let me just start Visio. So I'll create a new diagram here. So I'm just starting off with a blank template. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import a map that I've downloaded off the web. I've got that on my other screen here. Find the exact. Sorry, just bear with me here. I'm having a little bit of trouble with this icon. Here we go. So New South Wales rivers, and I'll bring that onto the screen. And so what we've got there is, this is just a base map, as I've mentioned. So I've just downloaded this off the web. It's, I believe it's, if I remember correctly, I think this one came from Wikipedia. It's basically a map of New South Wales with some major river systems on it. Now, in order to be able to link this to data, I need to have some shapes on it that are the same as the rivers. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be able to just, click, put a square on here and call it a river. If you look at the report that I showed you in the demo, I'm actually showing the path of the river. And so what I found the easiest way to do that, surprisingly, is to actually just draw it by hand. Now, I've got a laptop that has a stylus and a touch screen, and it makes it really easy to do that sort of thing. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to draw it with my mouse. So what I'll do is I'll zoom in on the map. And let's, for example, I'll do the Lachlan River to start with. So I'll just grab from the draw draw menu, the draw ribbon, the grey pen. And what I'm going to do is just trace around the Lachlan River. So I'll start down here. Now it helps to zoom in because then you can get really close. Now, also because I'm doing this as a demo and I don't want to spend too much time just drawing squiggly lines on my screen while everyone's watching, I'm going to just sort of rush it and do it with my mouse. Now, the important thing to note is when you do trace it, you need to trace it around. You can't just draw a single line, and I'll explain why that is in just a moment. So that there is the Lachlan River. Come back around. Lock that in. So once I've drawn around that river, I've now got a shape that I can use and I can link that data to it. But there is one additional step I need to do. And that is to click on that shape. Because it's an ink shape, Visio doesn't really know how to work with that, and Power BI doesn't really know how to work with that. So what I'll do is I'll come down here and I'll go convert ink, right click the shape, convert ink to geometry. And that now gives us a closed shape that I can use. I can now format that shape. And what I want to do is turn off the line so that there's no line around it. But I want to fill it with a solid fill. And I'll just use a light grey color. You can use any color you like. Let me try that again. Solid fill, no line. And I'll go with grey. I think I selected the, oh, grey's perhaps not a great color to use here. I'll go with red. So it's just nice and clear. Now I'll do the same thing on a couple of other rivers just so that we've got it all on the page. So I'll do the Murray now. Murray, I think, starts up here. Do these as quick as I can. So as you can see, I am quite rushing these. So it's not as neat as it could be. Also, I'm using a right-handed mouse and I'm left-handed. It's probably not helping things. Around. Here we go. Select tool. Now we've got a step there. Convert ink to geometry. Solid fill. No line. Now we don't want the outline because when we link this to Power BI and we're using the highlighting, it actually changes the fill color, not the line color. So if we had a line, it would stay the same color. Again, I'll make it red. This is just so that it's clear. I'm just using the red color so that it's clear. You can really use any color here because this, if there's no value, this is what it will show. But because we're actually going to be assigning colors to these rivers, we'll never use this exact shade of red, and it won't necessarily appear. Now, the next thing you'll notice that I had on my other map was the icons. Now, there's a couple of ways we can do these icons. The simplest way is to just go and insert a circle shape. Just do a quick search here for a circle. Now, by default, it's a massive circle. So I'll shrink that down. And we need some icons on that. So what I'll do now, there's a couple of ways we can do the icons. The first one is you can import an icon and then group it with the shape and just set the layering so that the icon is on top. The second way is we can just create a circle as I've done here and then change the font to Wingdings just so we've got some nice pretty visuals on it. So I've got Wingdings and I've straightened on the type of letter. That's a nice one. A font. Bigger perhaps. Works for me. And I'll come back over here and same as I did with the rivers, no fill, and, solid fill and no line. Again, I'll change that color, make it red. Also, just to make it look right, I'm going to change that font color to white. Theory. It's not working for me. Sorry, I've changed the wrong color there. White. One last try. Okay, it doesn't want to change it to white for me, but trust me, you can change it to white. I've done it before. I don't know why it's not cooperating right now. Shrink that down a little bit. And then we might want to have it. Oh, there we go. Now it's started to do it for me. We might have multiple icons here, so I'll create another one. So for the Murray River, we might have 3 statuses that we want to check. So make that one to B, copy and paste. So we have 3 statuses for the Murray River. And we'll copy and paste and do the same thing again for the Lachlan River. So because I've already got those defined, it's easy to just copy them on go. I'll place them appropriately. Now, I've done this for these rivers. I'm only going to cover a couple of them. I'm not going to do the full New South Wales river system. It's just going to take too long for this demo. But what we've got now is we've got a pretty graphic. We've got a map. We've got our rivers highlighted. We've got some status icons. The icons are a little oversized, but it'll do for the time being. But there's no data linked to them. So the next thing we need to do is bring some data in and link that up. So what I've prepared, actually I'll create it from scratch. I think that's probably a better way. So I'll just open Excel. Blank workbook. And all we need is a single column file, a single column sheet, a field called River ID. So now we'll add Lachlan River. And then we've got the statuses for each. So status A. B. And it doesn't matter which order we enter these in. As long as we've got it all on the sheet. It does help. When we import this into Visio, we'll be able to sort it anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. We need the same thing for the Murray River. And I will save that. As River ID. So it's just a standard Excel workbook. And once I've saved that, I need to close it as well, because if it won't allow me to open it in Visio at the same time as Excel. So now that we've got that data, I can come in here, go to Data, External Data window, and that brings up this little tab over here on the right. So if I click here, Quick Link Data to Shapes, browse for that file that we've just created. river ID, and it'll now import the data, and we'll see that listed here under external data. Now, by default, it doesn't realize that the first row is a column header. You can pretty much ignore that. There is a way that you can actually set it and tell it that to use that so it's not called F1, but it really makes very little difference when you're actually doing this. So the next thing we need to do is link this data to our external data, sorry, these shapes to our external data. So what I'll do, and I mentioned to you before, we can just sort it so it's nice and easy to find what we're looking at. So I'll start with the Lachlan River. And all I need to do is drag that on and drag it to the shape that I'm using, that I want to link it to, and then let go. And it will create these lovely data graphic labels, which we can safely ignore. So that's the river, status A, status B, status C, and we'll do the same for the Murray. Now, by default, when you link data in Visio to external data, it does want to display these data labels or data shapes. We don't need those because we're going to be using this in Power BI. It actually doesn't use that. So what we'll do is from the ribbon, we'll go to Advanced Data Graphics and set that to No Data Graphic. Oops, first I need to select everything, of course. Control A and then No Data Graphic. And then that gets rid of those labels. And now I can save it. So New South Wales Rivers Demo is the name of that file. Now you'll notice that as I'm saving this, I'm saving it to OneDrive. And there is a very good reason for that. And I'm going to go through the prerequisites right now before I go on to the next step of building this, because I think it's important to understand those prerequisites. So there's a few things that you need to be able to do this. You need to have a Visio Plan 2 license. If you have a Visio Plan 1 license, you'll be able to create the graphic, but you won't be able to upload it online and use it in your Power BI report. You need a OneDrive or a SharePoint location to host the file, and that must be accessible by the intended audience. So if you're planning on making this visible to external users who don't have access to your OneDrive or SharePoint, you need to consider that and adjust the security appropriately. And you also need the Power BI Visio visualization, but that's available free of charge, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. So let me start up Power BI. Okay, it's decided to open it up on my other screen, so I'll just drag it across. Okay, so now we've got Power BI. The first thing we need to do is we need to import our data. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a new data set for the purposes of testing, or for purposes of this demo, sorry. So I'm going to take our existing file, which has our river ID. I'm going to save that with a different name, river ID data. So when we were setting this up, we only needed that one column with the river ID. So now this is the data that we're going to show in our reports. So I'm going to add a couple of columns here. I'm going to add a status, and I'm going to add a date. So the status in this case, I'm just going to use a number between 1 and 3 to indicate sort of like a traffic light system, red, yellow, or green. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. Start again. Between 1 and 3. And we'll add a couple of dates. So this will allow us to put in some date filtering. With some random numbers. Now, because this is using a random number generator, I'm just going to copy and paste the actual values in there to get rid of the formulas, because Excel does like to recalculate those random numbers at the slightest provocation. And so now we've got our river ID data, and I'll import that into Power BI. So import data from Excel. River ID data. And on the right here. And so now we've got our data that we're going to use to display the report. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go into the marketplace, get more visuals, and download the Visio visual. There it is. We'll add that one to our report. Okay. And we'll put that onto the page. Now, the first thing you'll notice when you come in here, it's basically a blank report. There's nothing that you can do with the visual itself. It doesn't actually activate until you've added a data field to it. So what we're going to do is we'll drag our river ID into the ID field, and that will kind of activate the report for us. The next thing we need to do is import the Visio visual. Now, it needs, as I mentioned before, it's a SharePoint file, a OneDrive file, so it needs the URL of that OneDrive file. The easiest way I've found to do that is to come here, just change that here to read. So New South Wales Rivers demo, that's our report, our Visio diagram, sorry, and we want to view that online. So because that's a OneDrive share, it's taking us straight to that URL. And it's this URL that we need to give to the Visio report. Just excuse me a moment, I'm going to take this over here while I log in. Two-factor authentication. And so now I'll take that URL, now that the diagram's open, copy it, and paste it into here. And then connect. Now this sometimes takes a minute or two to load, but there we go. So we're still getting the red color that we've put in there, so we know that that's the shape that I've drawn. Until we've actually assigned data to it, it doesn't know how to deal with it and change the color. So the next thing we need to do is we've got our status field. So we'll bring the status in. And we can start formatting. So if I click on this, now when we're dealing with colors in Visio, it likes to use a color range. I'm just going to make it 3. We've only used values 1 to 3, so from 1 to 1, it's green. From 2 to 2, make that amber, and from 3 to 3, we'll make that red. Now, the other thing to note, by default, the values here, it's tried to sum them together. That's why we still have these dark red colors. We need to change this to don't summarize, because we're not summarizing this data, we're just showing the data as we've got it there. So that demonstrates color coding. Now I want to show you as well that you can also add labels to this. Now the labels can be added to the same visual, to the same icon, or it can be added to a different set of icon if you define that in Power BI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this status field. I'm going to quickly create a new column and call it status description. So it's 1, which we've defined as green. It's 2. And 3. And if I click on this visual again, I can now add that status description to the values. And as you can see, it started to include those labels there. Now, there's not a lot of formatting we can do on these labels. There is some, but we can move, we can change the position, so we can put it in the center, for example. I like to turn off the labels because it does make it a little bit neater. You can just see it there. I'll change the color to make it a little bit easier to read as well. Just to make it stand out. Purple. It's just different enough that we can see it on the report a little bit better. Make the font bigger. And not that big. So just so that we can clearly see that. And what it allows you to do is you can change the location, so you can have it at the top, bottom, middle. You can move it around. If we were to go into Power BI and create some labels underneath these shapes, you could link those labels to data, and then link these values to that shape as well. There's a whole range of different ways that we can do this, but this is just one example of it. What I'll do now, just for demonstration purposes, I'll insert a table with basically all of our data in it. I haven't really gone into formatting the date, so we're getting full day, month, year there. Just make the report a little bit. Just make it fit a little bit nicer. And I'll put a date slicer on as well, because that's the other part of this report. And we don't need hierarchy there. And so we can see on the second, a lot of yellow there. Then on the third, we're changing, and the status is changing as well. We can then go and publish this to the Power BI portal. I'm not going to do that right now. When you do publish it, it looks pretty much exactly the same as you see here, except you lose the field mapping section because you're consuming the report now, you're just viewing it. But yeah, you get the same functionality where you can zoom in and see the different parts of the document. It's taking a little while to zoom in there, but yeah. Okay, that takes us on to the next section. Does anyone have any questions, or is there anything that anyone would like to ask anything? Comments, questions? Sorry, I just saw somebody here in the chat window asking if I can zoom. Sorry, I do apologize if the writing was a little bit small. Okay, well, it looks like there's no questions. If you do want to get in touch with us later on, our contact details are on the screen here. So there's a phone number for the office, and if you want to get in touch with someone from sales. If you want to reach me directly, there's my email address, markos@alscott.com.au, and my LinkedIn link as well. LinkedIn's horribly out of date for me, but my LinkedIn profile, but it's there if anyone wants to connect. Also, for anyone who's registered to this presentation, there'll be an email coming out soon with a link in it to watch a recording of this. And there'll also be some special offers in there for training, I believe. So do keep an eye out for that. So if nobody has any questions, I think I'll wrap it up there. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much.